Rejected.
Maribel Cross said, crisp as a slap. On Christmas, don't embarrass yourself. A few heads turned. Maribel's diamonds flashed as she lifted her hand, not to apologize, just to dismiss. Her eyes skimmed the single dad's boots, his plain coat, the faint grease on his cuff, and her mouth tightened with certainty. By the way, where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments below. He didn't plead, he didn't raise his voice. He folded the napkin once, twice, like order was something you could still make. That calm made her lean closer, curiosity sharpening the cruelty. You should have said you were maintenance, she whispered. I don't date staff. Caleb Rowan felt heat climb his neck, but he kept his face still. Anger would be easy. Dignity took work. He met her gaze for one steady beat, then let it go, as if she wasn't worth the oxygen of an argument. You're right, he said softly. This isn't happening. It landed wrong, too controlled, too final. Maribel blinked, expecting bargaining and getting silence. The waiter froze with a bottle mid-air. Someone nearby snorted into his drink, quick and mean. Caleb pushed his chair back without scraping the marble. He didn't look for mercy in anyone's eyes. He turned toward the service door, because he knew exactly where people like him were supposed to exit. Because this wasn't about her, not really. It was about the little girl in the atrium who believed her dad always came back. He stepped into the service corridor and the world changed in one breath. Soft music became muffled. Gold light became harsh fluorescent. Carpet became rubber mat. Here, nobody wore diamonds. Here, the hotel admitted it ran on labor. His radio crackled. Maintenance, door fault at the atrium again. It's sticking. We need you. Caleb started walking, boots quiet, mind already mapping routes. He kept his pace even, as if humiliation couldn't follow him through a doorway. He rounded a corner and paused beside a gray access panel. Not because of the call, because of the vibration under his palm. The metal hummed, subtle and wrong, like a bridge carrying weight it didn't deserve. Caleb, a voice called. Ronak Hall approached with a tablet under one arm, tie loosened, eyes conflicted. Security supervisor, close enough to power to taste it, not close enough to command it. He glanced toward the restaurant door behind them, then back. You were with Maribel Cross, Ronak said. Caleb didn't answer the obvious. Atrium door fault? He asked instead. Ronak's jaw flexed. That's what they're calling it, he said. But the system's been throwing pressure alerts all day. Automation keeps resetting like someone's forcing it. I flagged it. It vanished. Who can force resets? Caleb asked. Ronak exhaled, humorless. People with private elevators. From the restaurant, laughter rolled out, bright, careless. It didn't belong in a building that was humming like this. Caleb pictured glass under strain, how it smiled right up until it shattered. He shut the panel and kept his voice level. Where's Lena? Ronak hesitated just long enough to hurt. In the atrium, he admitted. By the big Christmas display, she didn't want to leave without you. A hard pressure gathered behind Caleb's ribs. He kept it contained, the way he'd learned to contain worse. She can't be there, he said, calm enough to fool strangers, not calm enough to fool Ronak. I tried, Ronak said quietly. Maribel's team locked the event layout, investors, cameras. They said no disruptions. Of course they did. Power loved smooth surfaces. It hated inconvenient truth. Caleb started toward the atrium doors and the music grew louder with every step. Carols, champagne laughter. The sound of money pretending it could buy safety. His radio crackled again, sharper. Maintenance, pressure alarm just spiked. Atrium zone. Repeat, spiked. Caleb's hand went to the pocket where his small multi-tool sat, scuffed and familiar. A humble object nobody at that table would notice, until it mattered. He pushed the atrium door open a fraction. Cold air rushed out, wrong for an indoor space. The tree glittered. The guests smiled for photos like nothing could touch them. Lena stood near the display, red sweater bright against all the gold, her coloring book hugged to her chest. She looked up, searching, and when she saw him, relief lit her face. His mouth went dry. The atrium smelled of pine and spilled champagne. Under the carols, he heard a faint ticking in the ceiling, relays cycling, seals tightening. Lena's small breath fogged the glass. Above her, a pane of glass trembled, one thin shiver like a warning. Caleb didn't shout. He didn't panic. He looked up, listened, and understood what the building was trying to say. Somewhere, someone important had forced the system to stay quiet, and now it was about to scream. The tremor traveled again, a soft rattle that skittered through the atrium glass like nervous fingers tapping. A few guests glanced up. Mia smiled uncertainly, then went back to their phones. Someone laughed too loud. The music swelled, obedient and oblivious. Caleb stepped fully into the atrium. Cold air pooled around his ankles, wrong and sharp. He felt it through the soles of his boots, the way you feel a problem before you can name it. Above, the ceiling grid flexed. Imperceptible unless you knew what flex looked like when it lied. "Dad!" Lena waved, a small arm cutting through the glittering scene. "I see you," he said, keeping his voice even. He lifted a hand, the smallest signal. "Stay still." She nodded, trusting him without question, and that trust settled like weight on his spine. Behind him, Ronak slipped through the door, eyes scanning, radio pressed tight to his mouth. "They're saying it's a sensor glitch," he murmured. Executive override. Maribel doesn't want to panic. Caleb didn't look away from the ceiling. "It's not a glitch." "How do you know?" "Because it's cold," he said, "and the glass is singing." Another vibration rippled, stronger this time. A woman near the tree frowned, clutching her champagne as the surface of it quivered. "Ladies and gentlemen," a smooth voice boomed suddenly, piped through the atrium speakers. "Thank you for joining us for this beautiful Christmas Eve celebration. Please remain where you are while we resolve a minor technical—" The lights flickered, not off. Just enough to register, just enough to steal breath. Caleb moved. He crossed the polished floor at a brisk walk, not running, because running spread fear faster than truth. He reached the base of the tree and knelt beside Lena, one hand warm on her shoulder. "We're going to move," he said quietly. "Slow, just like practice." Her fingers tightened in his coat, then relaxed. "Okay." Around them, murmurs rose, phones lifted. Somewhere near the edge of the atrium, Maribel Cross stood with a cluster of investors, her posture immaculate, her smile strained at the corners as she listened to someone hiss in her ear. Caleb glanced toward a maintenance access panel disguised as decorative molding. He'd helped install it last year. Nobody else noticed it existed. "Ronak," he said, without turning. "Kill the music." Ronak blinked. "I can't. That's—" "Kill it," Caleb repeated, calm as a held breath. The second vibration hit like a warning shot. The carols cut out mid-note. Silence crashed down, heavy and absolute. Every head turned. Maribel's eyes snapped to him. Recognition flared, sharp and offended. She stepped forward, heels clicking. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "You're causing a scene." Caleb didn't look at her. He watched the glass. "You already have one," he said. A thin crack spidered across a high pane, then stopped. The crowd gasped. Someone screamed. "That's tempered," Maribel snapped, voice rising. "It's designed to fail safely," he finished. "Not like this." He guided Lena toward the edge, angling her path away from the pressure points he could feel more than see. Ronak followed, pale now, barking orders into his radio that finally, blessedly, stuck. "What do you need?" Ronak asked. "A ladder, a wrench, and permission," Golub said, eyes never leaving the ceiling. Maribel stepped between him and the access panel. "You do not have authority here." He met her gaze then, not angry, not pleading, just certain. "You don't have physics," he said. For a moment she looked like she might slap him. Cameras were rolling now. Investors whispered. The crack crept another inch. "Move," Ronak said suddenly, surprising himself as much as her. "If he's wrong, I'll take it. But if he's right—" Another pane shuddered. Dust drifted down like snow. Maribel stepped aside. Caleb popped the panel with his multi-tool, fingers steady. Warm air whooshed out, carrying the metallic tang of overstressed steel. He twisted a valve, listening, feeling for the building's response. The atrium groaned, then eased. The crack stopped spreading. A hush fell so complete it felt sacred. Caleb exhaled slowly. He wasn't done, not even close. But he'd bought them seconds, and seconds were everything. He glanced down at Lena, who watched him like he hung the moon. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded hard. "I knew you would." Something in his chest loosened. Behind them, a man in a tailored suit whispered, "Who is that guy?" Ronak answered without thinking. "Maintenance." The word sounded different now. As security began ushering people toward exits, murmurs followed Caleb's path, confusion, awe, resentment. Maribel stood frozen, watching her perfect evening tilt on an axis she didn't control. "If you're still here, don't go anywhere. Subscribe with the bell on. You're about to see what happens when power meets the one thing it can't buy." Caleb closed the panel, eyes already tracking the next failure point. He could feel it coming, deeper in the structure, where cosmetic fixes didn't reach. This wasn't over. It was just loud enough now that everyone was finally listening. The atrium breathed like a patient pulled back from the edge. Slow, uneven, not out of danger. Caleb felt it through the floor, a low-frequency thrum that hadn't settled into true stability. Temporary relief? Nothing more. Security guided guests toward the perimeter exits, voices hushed, movements jittery. Phones stayed raised. Once fear had a lens, it didn't let go easily. Caleb walked Lena to a bench near the service corridor, crouched to her level. "Stay here," he said. "Don't move unless Ronak says it's okay." She hesitated, then nodded, clutching her coloring book like armor. "You'll come back?" He brushed her hair back, gentle. "Always." When he stood, the air felt heavier. The building hadn't forgiven them yet. Ronak caught up, sweat beating at his temple. "Fire department's en route. Structural consultants, too. They won't make it in time," Caleb said. Ronak swallowed. "You sure?" Caleb didn't answer with words. He tilted his head, listening. A faint metallic pop echoed above, sharp as a knuckle cracking. "That was a shear connector," he said, non-critical. "But it means the load's shifting." Ronak stared at him. "How do you know that?" Caleb finally looked at him. "Because I've heard it before." Across the atrium, Maribel Cross regrouped fast, as people like her always did. She spoke in tight circles to investors, to security, to someone on her phone who kept nodding even when she wasn't looking. Control was her reflex. Then she turned, heels slicing the floor, and walked straight toward him. "You overstepped," she said, low and furious. "I let it slide because you scared people into thinking you were right. Hey, but this is my property, my liability, your risk," Caleb said, "and everyone else's." She scoffed. "Don't lecture me. You fixed a valve. Congratulations." Behind her, the ceiling creaked again, longer this time. Several guests flinched. A chandelier swayed, slow and ominous. Caleb gestured upward. "That valve redirected pressure. It didn't solve the imbalance. The atrium roof's bearing load it wasn't designed for." Maribel's lips thinned. The building passed inspection. "After the remodel?" he asked. Silence flickered across her face, gone in a blink. "Of course." Ronak looked between them. "The remodel 6 months ago?" he asked. "The glass expansion?" Maribel snapped her gaze at him. "This is not the time. It's the only time," Caleb said. "You replaced load-sharing beams with decorative supports to open sight lines. You kept the same safety model." "That's absurd," she said. "You can't possibly know. I installed the old system," he said quietly. The words landed heavier than shouting ever could. Ronak stared. Maribel laughed once, sharp and brittle. "No, you didn't." Caleb didn't argue. He turned away, already moving toward a restricted stairwell. "Where do you think you're going?" she demanded. "To the catwalk," he said. "There's a manual brace point above the north quadrant. If I can engage it, I can redistribute the load long enough to evacuate fully. You don't have clearance." He stopped, finally letting a hint of steel into his voice. "Then get it." Another crack split the air, not glass this time, metal. A child cried. The crowd surged, panic breaking through the thin dam of order. Maribel's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and then at the ceiling, then at the people looking to her for answers she didn't have. "Ronak," she said tightly. "Get him access." Ronak didn't hesitate. He swiped his badge and the stairwell door clicked open. Caleb took the steps 2 at a time, boots pounding, lungs steady. The higher he climbed, the colder it got. The hum grew louder, angrier. The building was arguing now. He emerged onto the catwalk, a narrow ribbon of steel above the atrium, invisible to guests below. The glass ceiling loomed inches above his head, spiderwebbed with stress fractures that caught the light like ice. He knelt, fingers tracing the brace assembly. Whoever had last touched it had done so for show, not function. Bolts hand-tightened. A cosmetic sin with structural consequences. Caleb pulled out his multi-tool, then paused. This wasn't enough. He needed a torque wrench. "Ronak," he said into his radio, "I need tools, real ones." "They're bringing them," Ronak replied, breathless. "But the fire chief wants you down, says it's unsafe." Caleb tightened his jaw. "It's already unsafe." Below, Lena watched from the bench, eyes wide but dry. She saw her father silhouetted above the tree, small against all that glass and light. Maribel followed her gaze, something twisting in her chest. This wasn't supposed to be happening, not to her building, not because of a man she'd dismissed over dinner. "Caleb," Ronak's voice crackled again. "They're saying to clear the atrium now." "Good," he said, "because in 90 seconds this brace either holds or it doesn't." The chandelier lurched, harder this time. Screams echoed upward, bouncing off steel. Caleb set his shoulders and got to work. Hands sure, mind focused. The building pushed back, testing him, daring him to be wrong. He wasn't. But he knew, deep in his bones, that this was still just the beginning. The brace groaned as he tightened the last bolt, metal complaining under a burden it had never been meant to carry alone. Caleb paused, palm pressed flat to the beam, feeling for tremor, for lie, for the subtle language structures used when they were about to betray you. It held, not cleanly, not happily, but it held. Below, the atrium erupted into motion as security finally pushed evacuation with urgency instead of polish. Guests hurried now, heels slipping, voices breaking into sharp fragments of fear. The Christmas tree swayed as people brushed past it, ornaments clinking like nervous teeth. Caleb keyed his radio. "North quadrant stabilized for the moment," he said. "You've got maybe 3 minutes before redistribution stresses the west glass." 3 minutes, Ronak echoed. "That's it? That's generous," Caleb replied. A gust of cold air ripped across the catwalk, stealing his breath. He looked up. The glass above him had frosted at the edges, condensation blooming where it shouldn't. Pressure differential. Bad sign. "Get Lena out," he said. "Now." "I'm on it," Ronak answered. Caleb shifted along the narrow walkway, boots gripping steel slick with moisture. Every step mattered. He could feel the building recalculating around him, automated systems fighting manual correction like offended pride. From below, Maribel Cross watched the evacuation unravel into something dangerously close to chaos. This wasn't how events were supposed to end. Not under her watch, not with cameras still rolling. And she barked orders that bounced off the reality forming above her head. "Why isn't this stopping?" She snapped into her phone. "I authorized a full override." Her consultant's voice crackled back, strained. "It's not responding. The system's resisting." Maribel's gaze flicked upward again, tracking the lone figure on the catwalk, the maintenance man. The man she'd rejected an hour ago like he was a stain on linen. "This is impossible," she muttered. Below the brace, the glass ceiling sighed, a long, low sound like breath leaving a chest. A fracture line raced outward, branching, stopping just short of catastrophe. Caleb froze, muscles coiled. He could hear it now, clear as speech. The west side was next. "Ronak," he said, "I need access to the west catwalk, and I need the load map from before the remodel." There was a pause, filled with shouting and alarms. "I don't have that map," Ronak said. "They archived it, executive only." Caleb closed his eyes for half a second. Of course they did. He unclipped his harness and moved again, faster now, urgency sharpening every sense. The catwalk narrowed as it curved, rails rattling under the building's protest. Below, Lena was halfway to the exit, Ronak's hand steady on her shoulder. She looked back once, eyes finding her father high above. He gave a brief nod. She nodded back, brave as she could manage. That look cut through him sharper than fear. A loud crack split the air. This one didn't stop. Glass rained down in a glittering sheet at the far edge of the atrium, harmless pieces cascading where people had been moments before. Screams spiked. Cameras zoomed. Sirens wailed somewhere outside. Maribel staggered back, her heart slamming. This was no longer a PR problem. This was survival. "Where's the fire chief?" she demanded. "He says we have to clear the building," someone shouted. "No!" she snapped, eyes locked on the catwalk. "We have to listen to him." The admission tasted like blood. Caleb reached the west access point and cursed under his breath. The panel was sealed, new, sleek, decorative. A remodel choice. He dropped to one knee, pulled out his multi-tool, then stopped. Not enough. He slapped the panel in frustration. The building answered with another shudder, impatient now. Below, Maribel's voice carried, sharp with something new. "What do you need?" she shouted upward. He looked down at her, really looked. She was pale, stripped of polish, human. "A breaker key," he called back. "And the old load map, the one you buried." She hesitated. then turned on her heel and actually ran, toward the executive elevators. The crowd watched her go, stunned. Minutes stretched thin as wire. The building creaked, glass ticking like cooling metal. Caleb braced himself against the rail, calculating margins in his head, all of them uncomfortably small. Ronak's voice crackled. "Fire department's pulling back. They won't send anyone in with you still up there." "Tell them to wait," Caleb said. "I'm not done." "You might not make it down." Caleb thought of Lena's small hand in his coat, of promises made without words. "I know." Maribel returned, hair loose now, heels abandoned. She skidded to a stop beneath him, breath ragged, holding up a tablet and a heavy metal key. "This?" she shouted. "Yes," he said. She tossed the key up. He caught it cleanly, fingers sure. The tablet followed, sliding across the catwalk to him. On its screen, the old load map glowed, his work, years ago, before titles and grief and choice had stripped him down to this. He stared at it for one heartbeat, then got to work. The building screamed. Caleb answered. The tablet trembled in his hands as the building shuddered again, a deep vibration that rolled through steel and bone alike. Caleb anchored himself against the rail and forced his breathing to slow. Eyes scanning the load map he knew better than his own reflection. Lines converged where they shouldn't. Stress pooled where beauty had replaced honesty. Someone had forced elegance onto a system that required humility. Below, people watched. Not as guests now, as witnesses. He twisted the breaker key and the panel coughed awake, alarms flaring red across the atrium. A collective gasp rose as lights strobed and the ceiling groaned louder, angrier. Panic surged, held back only by the thin promise that the man above them knew what he was doing. Maribel stood frozen beneath the catwalk, tablet forgotten at her feet, staring up as if the answer to everything she'd built wrong was written in the way his hands moved. There was no showmanship in him, no drama, just purpose. "Everyone back," Ronak shouted, voice hoarse. "Clear the center, now." Caleb felt the west side give a fraction, a warning flex that made his teeth ache. He didn't hesitate. He reached into the assembly, bypassed the cosmetic failsafes, and engaged the manual sequence that had been designed for moments like this, before it had been deemed unnecessary. Metal screamed, then settled, and the ceiling's violent shudder eased into a controlled vibration, the kind that meant forces were finally being shared instead of hoarded. Glass fragments skittered harmlessly across the far edge, no longer falling. The chandelier slowed its sway. A hush followed, heavy and stunned. Caleb sagged back against the rail for half a second, then straightened. This was the dangerous part, when people thought the storm had passed and forgot how close they'd been. "It's not done," he called down, "but you're not dying tonight." The words rippled through the crowd, relief breaking into sobs, into shaky laughter. Phones tilted higher. Somewhere, a reporter whispered his name, uncertain, like a guess. Maribel swallowed, throat tight. She looked around at the faces turned upward, at the cameras capturing every angle of her building being saved by the man she'd dismissed. The inversion was merciless. "You said you installed the old system," she called up. Her voice carried, stripped of its earlier edge. "When?" Caleb didn't answer right away. He adjusted a valve, listening for compliance, then finally looked down at her. Before the remodel," he said. "Before you decided beauty mattered more than balance." A murmur ran through the crowd. Her jaw clenched. "You're saying this is my fault?" "I'm saying physics doesn't care who signs the checks," he replied. Silence answered him, thick and absolute. Cameras caught Maribel's face as it changed, defensiveness cracking, something like shame leaking through. Ronak moved closer to her, eyes never leaving the ceiling. "He's right," he said quietly. "Yeah, if he hadn't been here—" She nodded once, sharp. "I know." Caleb finished the sequence and locked the system into a temporary equilibrium. The building exhaled, a long, settling sound that echoed relief. Fire alarms wound down. Sirens outside softened. Applause broke out. Hesitant at first, then swelling. Hands clapping not for spectacle but survival. It rolled up toward the catwalk, awkward and earnest. Caleb didn't bow. He checked the brace again. Below, Lena burst from the exit corridor and ran back as far as the line allowed, waving both arms. Her smile cut through the noise, grounding him in a way no applause could. He touched 2 fingers to his brow in her direction, a promise renewed. Maribel watched that exchange, something in her chest twisting painfully. This wasn't about competence alone, and this was about what he'd risked without asking permission. She stepped forward, lifting her hands to quiet the crowd. The applause faded, attention snapping to her out of habit, of power. "This man," she said, voice carrying, just prevented a tragedy. Caleb stiffened. Public words were dangerous things. "He is not just maintenance," she continued, each word costing her. "And I was wrong." The admission landed like another crack, this one inside her. A reporter's voice cut through. "Then who is he?" Maribel looked up at the catwalk again, eyes meeting his. For the first time there was no dismissal there, only recognition, reluctant and complete. "He's the reason this building is still standing," she said. "And the reason we're all walking out alive. If you want to see what happens next, what the truth about him does to her empire, subscribe now and stay with us. This is where power starts answering to the people it overlooked." Caleb closed the panel and clipped his harness loose. The danger had receded, but the reckoning had only just begun. The applause thinned into murmurs as emergency crews finally surged back inside, their confidence buoyed by the fact that the building was no longer actively trying to kill anyone. Caleb stayed on the catwalk, watching patterns settle, listening for lies in the steel. Stability wasn't a switch. It was a conversation, and he didn't trust silence yet. Below, Maribel Cross was already being surrounded. Assistants, legal counsel, PR. The machine of power rebooted itself quickly, even shaken. She answered questions with clipped nods, eyes flicking upward every few seconds despite herself. "Sir," a fire captain called up, cupping his hands. "We need you down, now." Caleb didn't move. He adjusted one last setting, slower this time, deliberate. When the hum finally dropped into a steady, honest pitch, he unclipped and made his way down the ladder, rung by rung, joints aching as the adrenaline ebbed. The floor felt strange beneath his boots, too solid after minutes of suspension. Lena was there the instant he stepped off, arms wrapping his legs tight. "You fixed it," she said, breathless, like it was fact, not praise. "Almost," he said, resting a hand on her head. "But you did great." Ronak hovered nearby, relief etched deep into his face. "They're calling it contained," he said. "Contained, Caleb. Do you know what that means?" "It means we bought time," Caleb replied. "It means nobody panicked enough to make it worse." Ronak laughed, shaky. "You really are impossible." Before either could say more, Maribel approached. Not with a microphone, not with an entourage. Just her, coat pulled tight around herself, eyes tired and searching. "Caleb," she said. He stiffened at the sound of his name in her mouth, then relaxed. "Your building's stable for now," he said. "But you need a full structural review, not a cosmetic one, and you need to disclose what you changed." Her chin lifted automatically, then dropped. I know. For a moment, neither spoke. The crowd leaned in without realizing it. Cameras adjusted, hungry. I humiliated you, she said finally. Publicly. He met her gaze, steady. You dismissed me, he corrected. There's a difference. She winced. I didn't see you. That's the problem, he said, not unkindly. She inhaled, slow. Who are you? Caleb glanced down at Lena, then back up. Someone who used to design buildings like this, he said. Someone who stopped. Why? Maribel asked. The question wasn't strategic, it was human. Because titles don't tuck kids in at night, he said, and buildings don't need you the way people do. The answer rippled outward, quiet and devastating in its simplicity. A reporter lowered her mic. A security guard wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Maribel nodded once, absorbing it. You should be in a boardroom, she said. He shook his head. I was. Turns out I'm better where things break. Sirens faded outside as the last guests cleared the atrium. The Christmas tree stood lopsided but upright, lights still blinking stubbornly, like joy refusing to evacuate. Maribel straightened, shoulders squaring, not with arrogance this time, but resolve. She turned toward the cameras that had been waiting for her collapse. There will be an independent investigation, she said clearly, and I will cooperate fully. Gasps, whispers, phones surged. And this man, she continued, gesturing toward Caleb, will be part of it if he's willing. All eyes swung back to him. Caleb felt the weight of the moment, the easy temptation of vindication. He thought of Lena's hand in his, of the quiet life he'd built deliberately. I'll advise, he said. I won't perform. A murmur of approval rolled through the room. Maribel accepted it with a nod. That's fair. She hesitated, then extended her hand. Not for cameras. For him. Caleb looked at it, then took it, grip firm and brief. The gesture wasn't forgiveness. It was acknowledgement. As she stepped back, Ronak leaned in, voice low. You know this changes things, right? Caleb glanced around at the dismantled spectacle, the humbled power, the watching crowd. It already has. Lena tugged his sleeve. Can we go home now? He smiled, soft and real. Yeah, he said. We can. As they walked toward the exit, the building held steady behind them, no longer screaming, no longer pretending. And for the first time that night, Caleb let himself believe that being seen, truly seen, might not be a liability after all. The revolving doors sighed shut behind them, muting the chaos they left inside. Outside, cold air slapped Caleb's face awake, sharp and clean, carrying the distant wail of sirens and the hiss of idling engines. Snow had started falling. Fine. In deliberate flakes that softened the city without fixing it. Lena tucked her hand into his, small fingers cold but steady. Did you get in trouble? She asked. He squeezed back. Not tonight. Behind them, the hotel's glass facade glowed unevenly, some lights dark, others stubbornly bright. Reporters clustered near the curb, voices rising as they spotted movement. A few cameras swung their way, curiosity sharpened by recognition. Ronak stepped out moments later, coat pulled tight, eyes scanning. They're spinning up a press statement, he said quietly. Maribel's team is already framing this as swift executive response. Caleb nodded once. Of course they are. That won't hold, Ronak added. Not with the footage. They both glanced at the crowd. Multiple angles, multiple phones. 100 witnesses who'd seen a maintenance worker take control while executives stalled. Fire chief wants a formal debrief, Ronak continued, and the city's building safety office. They're asking about the original load models. Caleb exhaled slowly. The reckoning had a shape now. It wasn't over. It was moving rooms. "Do you want me there?" Ronak asked. "Yes," Caleb said. "They'll need someone who knows how the system's supposed to work, and someone they trust." Ronak gave a wry smile. Funny how that changed in one night. Across the street, Maribel emerged from a black sedan, coat thrown over her shoulders, hair still loose. She paused when she saw them, hesitated, then crossed the street despite her assistant's frantic whispering. "I need to speak with you," she said, stopping a respectful distance away. Caleb turned fully to her. He didn't shield Lena, but he didn't step aside either. "The city is demanding documentation," Maribel said. "The original models, the change orders, the justifications." "And?" he asked. "And some of those justifications won't survive daylight," she admitted. Her voice was steady, but something underneath it strained. "If this becomes a public hearing, it will," he said. A camera shutter clicked. Maribel ignored it. "Then I want you there," she said, "not as my shield, as the truth." Caleb studied her face, searching for angles. He found none. Just a woman who'd built too much too fast and finally hit physics. "I'll testify to what I know," he said. "Nothing more, nothing less." She nodded, accepting the limit. "That's all I can ask." A reporter called out, "Mr. Rowan, what do you say to being rejected by the CEO hours before you saved her building?" Caleb didn't answer. He crouched to Lena's level, zipped her coat higher, brushing snow from her lashes. Maribel turned to the cameras instead. "This isn't about a date," she said sharply. "It's about accountability." The words surprised even her. Ronak let out a breath. "You just made it real," he murmured. Maribel's mouth tightened. It already was. A city official approached, clipboard in hand, eyes bright with urgency. "We're convening an emergency review at dawn," he said. "We'll need statements, and you," he added, looking at Caleb, "will need your credentials." Caleb straightened. "You'll have them." As the official walked away, Maribel lingered a moment longer. "I meant what I said inside," she told him. "I was wrong." He nodded once. "That matters. What you do next matters more." Snow gathered on the hotel steps, covering footprints, erasing the neat lines of earlier power. Across the street, a bus pulled up, doors hissing open. Lena tugged his hand. "Home?" "Home," he said. As they boarded, Caleb glanced back one last time. The hotel loomed, still standing, still beautiful, still flawed. But now it carried a crack no remodel could hide. The bus lurched forward, warmth blooming around them. Lena leaned against him, eyelids heavy. Ronak remained on the curb, watching until they disappeared into traffic. His phone buzzed. A message from a city engineer. "We ran the preliminary numbers." "You were right." Caleb felt the words settle, not as triumph, but as gravity. Tomorrow would bring rooms full of people who'd never worn work boots, all suddenly eager to explain what had gone wrong. This time, they wouldn't be able to pretend they hadn't seen him. Outside, snow kept falling. Quiet, persistent, honest. Morning didn't soften the city, it sharpened it. The hearing room smelled like coffee, wet coats, and impatience. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, flattening everyone into the same pale tone. Executives, engineers, officials, all stripped of evening glamour. Caleb sat at the long table with Lena beside him, her feet swinging above the floor, coloring quietly like this was any other weekday. Maribel Cross entered last. She looked different in daylight, No heels, no jewelry, just a tailored coat and a face that had slept badly. Cameras clicked anyway. Power still drew lenses, even when it flinched. Ronak leaned in from the row behind. "They're nervous," he murmured. "You can feel it." Caleb nodded. He felt it too, not fear, but pressure, the kind that built when truth had nowhere left to hide. The city chair cleared his throat. "We're here to determine responsibility for last night's structural failure and assess ongoing public risk." Caleb listened, hands folded, while officials recited timelines that bent reality just enough to protect themselves. Words like unexpected, isolated, unforeseeable. He waited. Patience was a skill too. Then Maribel was called. She stood, voice steady, and did something none of them expected. She didn't deflect. "The remodel compromised load distribution," she said, "and I approved it." A ripple moved through the room. Pens paused. Someone inhaled sharply. "I relied on assurances instead of verification," she continued. "And people were put at risk." Caleb watched the faces change, respect mixed with calculation. Admission didn't erase guilt, but it changed the math. The chair turned to him. "Mr. Rowan, your assessment." Caleb rose slowly. Every eye tracked him now. Not the maintenance worker, not the spectacle from last night, but something harder to categorize. "The failure wasn't sudden," he said. "It was cumulative. Cosmetic decisions stacked on structural ones until the system had no margin left." He reached into his bag and placed his old notebook on the table. Worn, oil-stained, out of place among tablets and binders. "This is the original load model," he said. "Mine, from before the remodel." A murmur rippled again. The symbolic weight of that battered object landed harder than any credential. It wasn't supposed to be here. Neither was he. "You designed this?" an engineer asked. "Yes." "Why were you working maintenance?" Caleb glanced at Lena, then back. "Because buildings don't raise children," he said simply. Silence followed, not awkward, not hostile, understanding. He walked them through the sequence, methodical, precise. No dramatics, just facts. Where the beams had been weakened, where the glass had been stressed, why the system fought overrides, why money hadn't helped. By the time he finished, the narrative had shifted. This wasn't an accident, it was neglect with a balance sheet. If you're watching this unfold and you've ever seen truth get buried under titles, subscribe now and stay with us. The next turn matters. The chair exhaled. "We'll be recommending immediate corrective action and a full audit." Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled. Maribel sat back down, eyes closed briefly, then opened them and met Caleb's gaze. No apology this time, no defense, just resolve. During the recess, a city engineer approached Caleb, voice hushed. "We'd like you on the review panel," he said. "Independent." Caleb considered it. Panels meant rooms like this. Meant time away from Lena. Meant being visible again. "Advisory only," he said. "Temporary." The engineer nodded. "Fair." Across the room, Maribel watched the exchange. When she caught his eye, she inclined her head, not as a superior, but as an equal acknowledging debt. Lena tugged his sleeve. "Can we get pancakes after?" He smiled. "Definitely." As the hearing reconvened, the room felt different. Lighter. Not because justice was done, because it had started moving. Outside, reporters would frame it as a fall from grace or a heroic reveal. Inside, and Caleb knew better. This wasn't about being discovered. It was about refusing to stay invisible when it mattered most. When the chair finally adjourned, people stood slower, thoughtful. Conversations changed tone. Power recalibrated, just a fraction. Caleb packed his notebook away, took Lena's hand and headed for the door. Behind him, Maribel spoke quietly to the room. Effective immediately, all pending remodels are paused. No fanfare, no spin, just consequence. Caleb stepped into the hall, breath steady. The work wasn't over, but it was honest now. And that made all the difference. The hallway outside the hearing room buzzed with low voices and restrained urgency, the kind that followed truth when it finally entered the building. People clustered in corners, whispering into phones, recalculating alliances. Caleb moved through it all with Lena at his side, feeling the air shift as surely as he'd felt the building's stress the night before. Ronak caught up to them near the elevators. "City Safety wants a site walk," he said. "Today, Media 2. Caleb nodded. "Good. You sure?" Ronak asked. "That turns this into a spectacle." "It already is," he replied. "Better it's honest." They rode down in silence, Lena leaning against his coat, humming to herself. When the doors opened, cameras were waiting, lenses snapping to life like insects sensing heat. Caleb shielded Lena with his body as they stepped out, not hiding her, just placing himself where he belonged, between risk and what mattered. The hotel looked different in daylight. Less magical, more exposed. Yellow tape cordoned off sections of the atrium, revealing scars that hadn't been visible under Christmas lights. Cracks traced the glass like veins. Temporary supports rose from the floor, blunt and unapologetic. Maribel joined them at the entrance, flanked by 2 city engineers. She paused when she saw Lena, then gestured for the cameras to give space. Some listened, some didn't. "This is where it started," Caleb said, pointing to the north quadrant. "The imbalance." An engineer nodded, eyes following his hand. "We ran the numbers overnight. You were right." Caleb felt no surge of triumph, just confirmation. They walked the perimeter, Caleb explaining what the remodel had taken and what it had failed to replace. His words were plain, technical, grounded. He didn't dramatize. He didn't accuse. The facts did that work for him. A reporter edged closer. "Mr. Rowan, do you feel vindicated?" Caleb stopped walking. The group halted with him. He considered the question, then shook his head. "I feel responsible," he said. "There's a difference." The reporter blinked, thrown. They reached the service corridor, the hidden spine of the building. Pipes exposed. Wiring labeled by hand. The place power never looked. Caleb ran his fingers along a conduit, checking temperature, listening. "This is where the system tells the truth," he said, "when you're not trying to impress anyone." Maribel watched him closely, absorbing every word like instruction. "I didn't come down here before," she admitted. "No," he said, "you wouldn't." It wasn't an insult, just a fact. Lena wandered a few steps away, peering at a toolbox left open on a cart. She picked up a bolt heavy for her hand. "This one's bent," she said. Caleb glanced over, startled, then smiled. "Good eye." An engineer took the bolt, examined it. "She's right," he said quietly. "Stress deformation." The moment rippled outward, small but potent. A child noticing what experts had missed. Attention shifted. Cameras dipped, then rose again. They returned to the atrium, now mostly empty. Sunlight poured through the fractured glass, illuminating dust in the air. The space felt raw, honest. "This will take months," an engineer said. "Full rebuild." Maribel nodded. "Then we'll do it right." She turned to Caleb. "I want you overseeing it." He didn't answer immediately. He looked at Lena, at Ronak, at the building that had almost taken something from him it would never have deserved. "I'll consult," he said. "I won't run it." "Why not?" she asked. "Because I know when to step back," he replied. "It's part of building something that lasts." She accepted it, jaw tight but respectful. As they finished the walk, the crowd thickened again. Someone began clapping, slow, tentative. Another joined, then more. It wasn't applause for a hero. It was recognition of labor, of competence revealed where it wasn't supposed to exist. Caleb felt it press in on him, uncomfortable and warm. He kept his posture easy, shoulders loose. This wasn't the end, it was alignment. A city official approached, voice low. "We're scheduling a public forum tonight," he said. "Transparency." Caleb nodded. "I'll be there." Maribel met his gaze. "So will I." They stood there a moment. Not allies, not enemies. Just two people on opposite sides of a truth that had finally surfaced. Lena tugged his hand. "Pancakes now?" she asked again, hopeful. He smiled. Yeah, the tension easing from his chest. "Now," he said. As they walked away, the atrium stood open and unfinished, sunlight catching on every flaw. Cameras kept rolling, but the story had already moved past spectacle. The real work was about to begin, and this time it would be done where everyone could see. By evening, the atrium was full again, not with guests, but with chairs, cameras, and the low murmur of a city deciding how honest it wanted to be. Temporary lights cast everything in stark white, stripping away the hotel's usual warmth. There was nowhere left to hide. Caleb stood near the back with Lena and Ronak, hands loose at his sides. He could feel the weight of eyes even before the forum officially began. Not curiosity now, expectation. Maribel took the front seat, not the podium. That alone shifted the room. Executives whispered. Reporters leaned forward. Power noticed when one of its own changed posture. The city moderator cleared his throat. "We're here to address public safety concerns and accountability following last night's incident." Caleb listened as questions rolled out. Technical, political, sharp-edged. He answered when asked, plainly, without embellishment. Each response peeled back another layer of assumption. Each fact landed heavier than outrage. A man in an expensive coat stood abruptly. "You're telling us this could have been avoided?" he demanded. "That profits were chosen over people?" Caleb met his gaze. "I'm saying corners were cut," he replied, "and buildings remember that." A murmur swept through the room. Another voice followed, brittle with anger. "Then why weren't we told? Why wasn't he—" The man gestured sharply toward Caleb. "Consulted?" All eyes shifted to Maribel. She stood slowly, no notes, no shield. "Because I believed authority was enough," she said, "and I was wrong." The words echoed, simple and devastating. Caleb felt something settle then, not vindication but balance. The room leaned toward truth instead of away from it. Questions kept coming. About oversight, about past projects, about who else had been ignored. Each answer widened the circle, turning a single night into a pattern no one could unsee. Lena shifted beside him, restless. Caleb knelt and whispered, "Almost done." She nodded, then raised her hand. A ripple of surprise ran through the room as the moderator hesitated, then smiled gently. "Yes?" She stood, small voice clear. "My dad fixes things," she said. "But people don't listen until they're scared." Silence fell, complete, reverent. Caleb closed his eyes for a beat. Around him, cameras lowered without instruction. No one rushed to fill the space. "That's perceptive," the moderator said softly. Lena sat back down, satisfied. From that moment the tone changed. Less combative, more reflective. People weren't asking how to protect reputations anymore. They were asking how to prevent the next failure. An engineer spoke up. "We need labor voices in planning rooms," she said. "Not just after disasters." Heads nodded. Notes were taken. Maribel looked back at Caleb once. Something like gratitude in her eyes, something like resolve. She addressed the room again. "Effective immediately," she said. "All frontline staff will have direct reporting channels to safety review. No filters." Applause broke out, not loud, but sustained. As the forum wound down, a reporter called out, "Mr. Rowan, do you feel justice was served?" Caleb considered it. He glanced at Lena, at Ronak, at the exposed beams and temporary supports overhead. "Justice isn't a moment," he said. "It's maintenance." That line traveled fast. When the crowd finally dispersed, the atrium felt quieter than it had all day. Not empty, rested. Ronak clapped him on the shoulder. "You know that line's going everywhere, right?" Caleb shrugged. "Then maybe it'll stick." Maribel approached once more, stopping a respectful distance away. "You didn't have to stay," she said. "Yes," he replied, "I did." She nodded. "The board will push back." "They should," he said. "Means they're paying attention." She hesitated. "When this is over, would you ever consider coming back, officially?" Caleb looked around the space. Unfinished, honest, waiting. Then down at Lena. "No," he said gently, "but I'll help you build it right." She accepted that, shoulders easing. That might be better. Outside, night settled over the city, cold and clear. Caleb zipped Lena's coat, lifted her into his arms when her legs finally gave out. As they walked toward the exit, the atrium lights dimmed to their temporary setting. No glamour, just enough to see the work ahead. Behind them, conversations continued, quieter now, grounded. For the first time since the tremors began, the building felt like it was listening back. And so was the city. The atrium was nearly empty when Caleb returned the next morning, sunlight angling through fractured glass and temporary braces. The city had moved on to other headlines, but the building hadn't. It waited, patient and exposed, like a truth after the crowd leaves. Ronak met him near the service entrance, coffee in hand. "They're drafting the preliminary findings," he said. "It's not pretty." Caleb nodded. "It shouldn't be." Workers moved deliberately now, helmets on, voices low. No rush, no pretending. The space felt different, less ornamental, more honest. He walked the perimeter, checking supports, listening to the quiet language of steel that finally wasn't being ignored. Maribel arrived without announcement, coat folded over her arm. She stopped beside him, following his gaze upward. "The board's furious," she said. "Sponsors, too." "That means it's working," he replied. She let out a slow breath. "They want a statement, a clean one, something that reassures markets." "And?" he asked. "And I told them no," she said. "We already tried clean." He looked at her then, really looked. She was tired, not performatively, genuinely. The kind of tired that came from standing in daylight too long after years in shadow. "They'll make it personal," she continued. "They'll say I acted alone, or that I was misled, or that I overcorrected because of last night." Caleb said nothing. "I won't let them," she added. "If this falls, it falls honestly." A distant drill whined, echoing through the space. He nodded once. "That's all anyone can ask." They walked together toward the service corridor, past exposed beams and handwritten labels. Workers glanced up, then back to their tasks. No spectacle now, just respect, quiet and earned. At the corridor entrance, Lena sat on an overturned crate with a book, legs crossed, waiting. She looked up and smiled when she saw him. "Can we get hot chocolate after?" she asked. He smiled back. Deal. Maribel watched the exchange, something softening in her expression. You chose well, she said quietly. So did you, he replied. Eventually. She accepted that without flinching. A city official approached, clipboard tucked under his arm. Final hearings tomorrow, he said. Public. Recommendations will include fines, mandated rebuilds, oversight. Maribel nodded. I'll be there. And you? The official asked, turning to Caleb. I'll testify to the systems, he said, nothing more. The official smiled faintly. Sometimes that's everything. When he left, Maribel hesitated. I owe you more than an apology, she said. Caleb shook his head. You don't owe me. You owe the people who work in places like this. Keep listening to them. She nodded, resolve settling back into her posture. Different now, less brittle. I will. As she walked away, Lena hopped down and slipped her hand into his. She's not scary anymore, she observed. He squeezed gently. People usually aren't once they're honest. They stepped back into the atrium together. The braces held. The glass caught the light without trembling. The building felt quieter inside itself. Caleb took one last look around, committing the scene to memory. Not the danger, but the aftermath. The moment when truth stayed, even after power tried to leave. They headed for the exit, footsteps echoing softly. Behind them, the building stood unfinished, accountable, and alive. Tomorrow, the city would decide consequences. But today, something rarer had already happened. Everyone who mattered had seen the truth, and it wasn't invisible anymore. The final hearing didn't feel final at all. It felt like a beginning that refused to dress itself up. The room was fuller than before, more workers than executives this time, more notebooks than phones. The city officials sat straighter. The audience listened harder. Nobody expected absolution. They expected answers. Caleb sat with Lena beside him, her legs swinging, her presence grounding him. He didn't scan the room anymore. He didn't need to. What mattered was already in front of him. When he was called, he stood without ceremony. He spoke about load paths and redundancies, about how systems failed when feedback was ignored, about how maintenance wasn't a job title, it was a philosophy. He didn't accuse, he explained. And in doing so, he left nowhere for excuses to stand. Maribel testified after him. She didn't minimize. She didn't redirect. She owned the decisions, the pressure, the blind spots. When the chair announced the findings, penalties, mandated rebuilds, independent oversight, she nodded like someone who understood the consequence wasn't punishment. It was correction. Applause didn't come. Respect did. Outside, the steps filled slowly, reporters waiting for a clean ending that didn't exist. Caleb stopped just beyond the doors, winter sun catching the edges of the city. Lena squinted up at him. So, is it done? She asked. He thought about the building, the workers, the people who would speak up next time because someone had listened this time. This part is, he said. Ronak joined them, hands in his pockets, lighter than he'd been in years. You know they're already changing protocols, he said. People are asking questions they never asked before. Caleb nodded. Good. Maribel emerged moments later, no entourage now. She stopped a few steps away, respecting the space. I meant what I said, she told him, about listening. I know, he replied. She hesitated. You didn't take anything from this. He looked at Lena, then back at her. I took what I needed. She smiled faintly, understanding at last. They parted there, not as friends, not as enemies, just as two people who'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Later, at a small diner with fogged windows and chipped mugs, Caleb watched Lena stir hot chocolate with focused seriousness. The world felt quieter here. Honest. "You're not invisible," she said suddenly, looking up at him. He blinked. "What?" "People saw you," she said, like it was obvious. "Even the mean ones." He smiled, warmth spreading through him that had nothing to do with the drink. "Yeah," he said. "They did." Outside, the city moved on. Buildings stood. Work continued. Somewhere, someone in a planning room would pause before cutting a corner, not because of fear, but because of memory. That was enough. As they left the diner, Caleb held the door open, feeling the solid weight of it in his hand. Maintained, reliable, the way things should be. This story started with rejection. Public, sharp, meant to put someone in their place. It ended with something quieter. Recognition. If you want another story like this, ask me for the next story title. Subscribe and don't miss our next story. They mocked the night guard until the alarm locked everyone inside. Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?